I will never forget the sight of my house reduced to rubble, not by storm or fire or accident, but by the deliberate order of a woman who believed she ruled the neighborhood like a queen. It was a Tuesday afternoon when I returned from signing the final loan documents at the bank, still carrying the folder of closing papers under my arm. I had been dreaming of this moment for years, the completion of my own house, built from the ground up, a place designed with sweat, patience, and every dime I had saved since college. But as I turned onto the street, I froze. Dust clouds rose into the air. The sound of metal tearing against wood echoed like screams. And there, roaring in my yard, was a bulldozer flattening the last intact walls of my living room. And in front of it all stood Karen, HOA president, neighborhood tyrant, a woman who had made her name by terrorizing people with fines for flowers planted outside of approved color schemes. She was perched like a general on the battlefield, arms crossed, lips curled in a smirk that made my blood boil. Her voice cut through the noise. About time you showed up. You built without proper approval, so we took care of it. Consider it a lesson. I dropped the folder and staggered forward. This is my home. My permits are legal. My blueprints signed by the county inspector. You had no right. She waved me off like an annoying fly. Don't bother yelling. It's gone now. And unless you want to be buried in lawsuits and fines, you'll keep your mouth shut about it. Trust me. Fighting the HOA is a war you can't win. The neighbors who had gathered on the sidewalks looked horrified but silent, too used to her wrath to speak. I felt rage like fire in my chest. My dream, my everything, destroyed before it even began. And now she had the audacity not only to threaten me but to dare me to stay silent. For a moment, I wanted to scream until my lungs gave out. But instead, I pulled out my phone and started recording. Karen's smirk faltered when she realized what I was doing. You put that down right now. HOA matters are private. And if you share that online, we'll sue you for defamation. Her voice trembled at the edges. That was when I understood her power was not real authority, it was fear. Fear she had instilled in everyone else. But I had already lost everything that mattered, and I had nothing left to fear. I spent that night not sleeping but gathering evidence. Every permit, every contract, every email with county officials. I spoke with the construction crew who confirmed they had seen Karen waving papers at the bulldozer driver, shouting that she had full authorization. She hadn't. The only paperwork she held were the HOA bylaws she printed off her home computer, brandishing them as if they trumped county law. But then came a twist I hadn't seen coming. The next morning, as I was photographing the ruins, a man approached me quietly. He was older, with tired eyes and a firm handshake. Name's David. I used to be on the board. Got forced out when I asked too many questions. He handed me a USB drive. Everything you need is on here. Financial records, emails, Karen's private communications. She's been funneling HOA money into personal accounts and using intimidation to cover it up. What she did to you is the same thing she's been doing in smaller ways for years. People were just too afraid to fight back. But if you expose her with this, she won't survive the fallout. I stared at him, barely able to speak. Betrayal was one thing, but a paper trail of corruption? This was bigger than just my destroyed home. It was a rot that had poisoned the whole neighborhood. And suddenly, I knew this wasn't just about me anymore. That night, I went live on social media, broadcasting from the ruins of what was once my dream home. Behind me, the pile of broken beams and shattered windows loomed like a gravestone. I laid out every document, every permit, every legal paper. Then I played Karen's threats, recorded word for word. The comments exploded with outrage. And then, with shaking hands, I plugged in the USB and revealed the emails, the stolen money, the secret conversations where Karen boasted about crushing dissenters and keeping the neighborhood in line. The video went viral before the night was over. News vans swarmed the street the next morning. Karen stormed out of her house screaming about fake news, about slander, about how none of it mattered. But when reporters shoved microphones in her face and neighbors she had once silenced began shouting their stories of harassment, the tide turned. She wasn't feared anymore, she was despised. When county officials arrived with police escorts, Karen's screams reached a pitch that curdled the blood. She tried to waive the bylaws again, tried to block the officers from entering the HOA office where files were seized. But the handcuffs clicked shut. For the first time, she looked powerless, her arrogance drained away into pale desperation. The neighbors who had gathered didn't cheer, they just watched, their silence heavier than applause. As for me, I stood in front of the cameras, rubble at my back, and told the truth. My house was gone, but the real victory was seeing a community rise from fear into courage. And as weeks passed, as Karen was indicted for fraud and abuse of power, as new leadership was elected with promises of transparency and decency, I realized something. She had tried to destroy me, to silence me, but in doing so, she gave me the very platform that tore her empire down. My home could be rebuilt, but her reputation would never rise from those ashes. So I ask you, was it justice enough that she was arrested and exposed? Or should there have been harsher consequences for someone who destroyed not just walls and beams but the trust of an entire community? Share your thoughts. Was this ending fair? Or did Karen get off too easy? The day Karen was arrested should have been the end, but it was only the beginning. The wreckage of my home still stood as a scar in the middle of the neighborhood, reminding everyone of the madness that had unfolded. Neighbors drove by slower now, some offering me sympathetic nods, others avoiding my eyes as if ashamed they had ever let her reign unchecked. But the deeper I dug into the files David had handed me, the clearer it became that Karen's destruction of my home was not just a reckless abuse of power, it was part of a larger scheme. Buried in her emails were exchanges with a local developer, a man whose name carried weight in the county courthouse. The two of them had been colluding to seize properties under flimsy pretenses, violations that gave the HOA the pretext to fine homeowners into foreclosure or force them out. My lot was particularly valuable, sitting on the corner where the developer wanted to expand a gated enclave. I wasn't just a victim of her ego, I was a target in a profit plan. I remember sitting in the dark one night, rubble behind me and my laptop casting its glow on my face, when I realized how deep this went. Karen wasn't just a tyrant drunk on neighborhood power. She was a willing accomplice in a fraud operation designed to strip people of their property. And suddenly, the anger that had burned in my chest transformed into something sharper, colder, more focused. It wasn't just about Karen Anna Marie, it was about justice for everyone she had bulldozed figuratively and literally. When the trial date was announced, the courthouse became the new battleground. Karen arrived in a wrinkled blazer, her face pale and puffy from weeks in custody. She tried to maintain her air of superiority, waving to reporters and shouting that she would be vindicated. But her voice cracked with desperation. The prosecutors laid out the case with precision. Unauthorized demolition, embezzlement, fraud, conspiracy with the developer. And then, the piece de resistance, a video evidence of her standing in front of my bulldozed home, smirking as she threatened me to stay silent. The clip played on the big screen, her words echoing in the courtroom. Gasps rippled through the gallery. The defense tried every tactic. They painted her as a misunderstood leader, a woman who only wanted order and beauty in the neighborhood. They called me reckless, claiming I built without proper consent. But every permit, every document, every timestamp on the county website showed the truth. And when David took the stand with trembling hands but a steady voice, detailing how Karen forced him off the board and covered up her financial misdeeds, the last pillar of her defense collapsed. But the twist came midway through the trial. A young woman stood up from the back row and asked to speak. She introduced herself as Emily, Karen's niece. Her voice shook, but her words cut deep. She revealed she had been the one managing Karen's emails, often ordered to delete incriminating ones, threatened to lose her college tuition if she didn't comply. But Emily had quietly archived everything. With her laptop in hand, she revealed even more records than David had provided, conversations between Karen and county officials she had bribed, notes about which neighbors to target next, even private messages bragging about how nobody can touch me, I own this town. The courtroom erupted. The judge slammed his gavel to restore order, but the damage was done. Karen's own family had turned against her, driven not by vengeance but by conscience. Emily's courage broke the last illusion of Karen's untouchable power. When the verdict was read guilty on all major counts, Karen's shriek echoed through the chamber. She lunged at the defense table, knocking over water glasses, screaming about betrayal, corruption, conspiracies against her. Officers restrained her as she wailed, "This neighborhood will rot without me." But the truth was, it was already healing. The day she was sentenced, neighbors gathered at the ruins of my home, not for a vigil of loss, but for a celebration of rebirth. The new committee, led by Mrs. Alvarez, announced that the HOA would be dissolved entirely and replaced with a voluntary neighborhood council. No more fines, no more petty violations, no more dictatorship. People cheered, children laughed. Someone even strung up fairy lights across the rubble, as if to mark the start of something new. And then something remarkable happened. Volunteers neighbors I barely knew showed up with tools and trucks. One brought lumber, another concrete mix. "We'll help you rebuild," they said. "She took your house, but she won't take your future." In the weeks that followed, every hammer swing, every nail driven, every wheelbarrow of gravel laid was more than construction, it was healing. My home rose again, not from a contractor's crew, but from the hands of a community that had finally shaken off fear. Karen, meanwhile, disappeared behind prison walls. The developer faced charges too, his empire crumbling under the weight of exposed deals. And Emily, once silenced, was offered scholarships by neighbors who admired her bravery. The story went national, a cautionary tale about unchecked HOA power and a reminder that silence enables abuse. The first night I slept in my rebuilt home, I walked onto the porch and listened. The air was quiet, peaceful, but alive with something new: trust. Neighbors waved as they passed, not out of obligation, but genuine connection. Children played freely without fear of fines. Gardens bloomed in colors Karen once outlawed. The community was alive again. I thought back to her words, "Keep your mouth shut," and I smiled, because my voice hadn't just saved, might had freed everyone around me. She bulldozed my house, but in the end, she bulldozed herself. So I leave the question with you: was her downfall enough to balance the damage she caused? Or should there be even heavier consequences for someone who destroyed homes, trust, and dignity? Was justice served? Or is this story proof that justice is only ever as strong as the voices willing to demand it?